What's up, guys? Paul Oneid here, and I am live at Elite FTS. If you're not familiar with Elite FTS, they make some of the most badass equipment, but they're also one of the first places that I ever began my education in strength and conditioning. I wouldn't be the coach that I am today without the impact of Elite FTS and Dave Tate, who you'll see in this video. We're going to focus today on what coaches feel are the best ways to improve hip mobility by training the core. The ability to brace and the ability to move the hips without losing the connection between the rib cage and pelvis. Essential when we're talking about heavy loading under the compound lifts and also mitigating risk. Let's get into it. Let's ask the coaches, let's ask the experts, and let's see what they feel. All right, guys, we are back with Dave Tate. We're talking about core strength, specifically exercises that train the midsection, but also double as hip mobility exercises. Dave, you've been around some of the strongest people on the planet. You've also dealt with a shit ton of injuries to your hips, namely the hip replacements. What's one of your key exercises to improve core strength and improve hip mobility?
I think what we've seen most in the last 5 years is bracing has become a big issue. Where it's weird because the longer you're around this, the issues change. Like in 4-year periods, 5-year periods, it's, before that it was like lats were a big issue, like, right? And you'll see it across social media and different posts, and it's because coaches are seeing it, so they're making videos to show their clients, and then they post it, and now here we are back to this bracing thing. So I would regress it all the way back to, do they know how to brace? Okay. Right? Do they know how to do a dead bug efficiently? Do they know how to do, the big three, a plank, right? So if they can do a plank, a military plank, and hold it for 5 minutes, great, but that's not bracing, right? If they brace properly, trying to do a plank if they're really doing it right, 4 to 6 seconds, man, is brutal.
You can cheat a plank because you can just use your erectors.
Yeah, so until that is understood, then all the other exercises really don't matter, because that should be practiced in everything you do. So if you want to have a more effective lat pull down, are you braced? Because if you're not braced, the lats are not going to open as much, they're not going to contract as much. But how many people do it? Fucking zero. How many people do it when they do a push down, which is essentially close to the same stance as a deadlift? They're not bracing. So the bracing is that's key. Then if we were going to get into just the hip mobility, with the demographic I see, it's usually just getting them into a wider stance squat or a sumo deadlift and slowly working it down over time.
So we're talking dead bug, we're talking, that proximal stability with distal mobility, and then integrating that into the core lifts where you actually have to be underloaded.
Integrating it in everything.
Right.
Even accessory lifts. They should be integrated in, because it's such a weak point that they have to be able to maintain their core. The people listening, how many times, if you've ever tweaked your back, did you do it on a main lift?
Oh, very rarely. Yep.
Which means you don't know how to brace when you pick up a laundry basket. You don't know how to brace when you're getting in and out of your car. You don't know how to position your pelvis and your sternum just for basic movement patterns. This drives me crazy. It's like, so you'll do it for the 3 or 4 minutes that you're going to do your core shit before you train, and then the rest of the entire day, it's a clusterfuck. Yeah. And you think it's going to hold. It's not, so that's where I'll fall back to.
I love it, dude. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Yeah.
All right, so when we're talking about the dead bug, phenomenal exercise selection when it comes to bracing and when it comes to hip mobility, because of the ability to stabilize the trunk while moving the hips through a range of motion. You can't cheat a dead bug the same way that you can cheat a plank. In a plank, if you're not stacking your core, you can compensate with your erectors. But with the dead bug, you have the feedback of the floor and your body pushing that lower back into the ground. So the way we're gonna do this, we're gonna position ourselves on the ground, arms and knees at 90 degrees. We're gonna stack our rib cage, so we're gonna pull that pubic bone to the top of the rib cage, and then we're gonna go through the range of motion. So I'm gonna start this movement by exhaling, pulling my ribs down. Then I'm gonna, in an alternating fashion, bring the leg out, bring the arm overhead. I'm not compensating by losing that connection. Keeping that there, and then bringing it back. The cool thing about the dead bug as well is there's a ton of ways to make it both easier and harder. So if I want to make it harder, I can put a band around my feet so that every time that I extend that leg, I have to engage that opposite hip flexor. I can also band it from the top, so I can do a pull over with a band, holding it in front of me to cue the ribs down. So wherever the weakness is within your trunk stabilization, so if your issue is you lose that connection between the pubic bone and the rib cage, then I would do a pullover variation. If you have weak hip flexors, I would do the band around the feet. You can also do that dead bug with bands from the front, so you have to pull in from the foot to engage that hip flexor. You can also do them weighted. You can do them on an incline. Tons of different ways to modify the movement based on your needs. Here with Sam Brown. Sam is a phenomenal coach, currently working in human performance with the Air Force. So actually a phenomenal population to look at when it comes to building core strength. Sam's competed in powerlifting and strongman. He's got the physique of a pro bodybuilder. Obviously.
Stage ready. I'm 1 can of Protan away.
I had a doctor ask me, are you on protein? Terrific. Terrific question. Sam, I want to hear from you. Hip mobility is something that I've been on a bit of a soapbox lately with my own training, especially getting into running. Powerlifting, bodybuilding don't really lend to that. Now you're dealing with a population that has to literally be prepared for anything.
Yes.
What is your favorite go-to exercise to improve hip mobility when it comes to training the core?
It's interesting. I deal with this on a daily basis. So for those that don't know, everybody always thinks, oh, you're a pilot in the Air Force, you must be one of the best athletic specimen on the planet, and that is just simply not the case. A lot of the pilots I work with are essentially sitting at a desk that is just so happen to be flying at 30,000 feet. They're in a seated position, just like most people, for the majority of their day. And a lot of the time, when it comes to the hips, they're just bound up. They are completely unaware of what, tension in the core, being able to understand their positioning is all about. So one of the first things that I do with anybody, it's not directly a core exercise, but it is beneficial, is a hip airplane. Okay. I put them in a position to feel how their hips should move. If they can't get into that position in a supported hip airplane, I'm like, okay, we need to work on this. It gives us a really good diagnostic of where you're tight, where you're bound up, the positions that you're in. And ironically enough, I was working with somebody the other day. I put them in a hip airplane and they're like, my core is lighting up. And it's like, yeah, it's trying to stabilize your pelvis. It's trying to stabilize your hips. So we did that a few times and all of a sudden, hips kind of woke up a little bit. He was able to get into a better squat position and everything felt better. And I was like, is that something you could do on a daily basis? He's like, oh, yeah. I was like, you're full of shit. You're not going to do this at all.
I mean, hopefully it does. Hopefully it
does.
But
it's one of those things where I think a lot of people, they have a tendency of trying to overcomplicate it and thinking about, super niche, nuanced things. When a lot of the people that we work with, it's like, just put them in a position and get them to kind of play around with that position and feel it. And that's been the greatest success we've had, is just to show them, hey, you're restricted. Because I could say, hey, you're a pilot, you have tight hips. They're like, no, I'm not. And the ego just takes over. Right. But it's like, all right, try this exercise for me. Supported, 2 hands, holding onto a rack, very safe position, and they can't stabilize at all. And all of a sudden you have that buy-in. It's like, hey, then I get to explain the core plays a huge role in your hips being able to be stable. If we're not able to get that stabilization from the core, the hips are going to be wiggling around and you won't be able to control them. So then it leads into that conversation of some of the direct core work that we can do. Because it doesn't matter the population. Core work always is I'll do it at the end. I'll do it at the end. And you can't. If you're worth a shit as an athlete, if you're worth a shit as a coach, you have to realize how important that is going forward.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
So the beauty of a hip airplane, as Sam mentioned, is we have to stabilize the hips in space. So if you're not familiar with what a hip airplane is, it is a single leg hip hinge movement where we go through hip internal and external rotation. If you're unable to stack the rib cage and pelvis, you're not going to be able to stabilize that hip. So what we can do is we can use an assistance piece. We can also use a rack or a barbell or anything to stabilize. And then we're going to get into that hinge. We also have to stabilize the foot, and we have to keep the knee stacked over top of it. So the key here is we are rotating the pelvis around the femur. That's the goal. We can also get into it in an alternating fashion. I like using it as a single leg stance exercise as well. So in this instance, we're gonna go into a single leg stance, into that single leg RDL, close, open, close, up, hip hinge, It's also a movement that we can load. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take a kettlebell, you can take a dumbbell, and you're gonna loop it around your back and go into that as well. So we're really training that glute to stabilize the pelvis. And as Sam mentioned, if you're doing it right, those obliques are gonna be really involved, because if your obliques aren't engaged, you're gonna be sagging through your midsection, and you won't be able to move the trunk as a unit around the hip. So with this one, we're just gonna take a 10-pound plate, and you can load this as heavy as you want. If I was in a training session, I've used as heavy as 60 or 70 pounds. You're gonna take a 10-pound plate, or any weight that is heavy enough or challenging enough. You're gonna put it around your back on the opposite hip, so that it's pulling you into internal hip rotation. So that weight is pulling my hip closed, and then I'm gonna squeeze my glute as hard as I can, hold, and come back down, trying to go through full hip internal and external rotation. All right, folks are starting to head out. We got to pivot. Some of my favorite exercises to improve hip mobility are going to be exercises that take us through hip flexion and extension, and then exercises that allow us to stabilize laterally. Some of my favorites are going to be the GHD reverse leg raise, the Copenhagen plank, and a single arm farmer carry. So let's go through those. So we're gonna use a glute ham raise. Since we're at Elite FTS, we have access to their awesome glute ham raise machine. We're gonna position ourselves so that our hands are holding the foot plate and our feet are out in front of us. And what we're gonna do here is we're gonna get into global hip and thoracic spine extension. We're gonna exhale at the bottom, tuck our pelvis underneath, and then bring the legs all the way up into a reverse crunch. Phenomenal exercise when you implement the proper breathing mechanics to get that posterior pelvic tilt to start and then come up. It's also really fucking hard. The next movement we're going to talk about is the Copenhagen plank. This is a phenomenal movement for anti-lateral flexion. It also integrates the adductor and the oblique. We have an anterior oblique sling of our core that integrates our oblique with our adductor. If you're familiar with the exercise, the dead bug, that trains the posterior oblique sling, which is the lat, the QL, and the glute. So if we're training the lat, QL, glute on the back end, we need to train that front end, which is oblique, adductor. So we're gonna position ourselves in a side plank position. Foot is going to be up on the bench. We can scale this exercise, so the more of your upper leg is on the bench, the easier the movement will be. The further you move that lever arm away, so the less of your leg is on the bench, the harder it's gonna be. We can train these for isometric holds, and we can also train these for actual active lateral flexion. And then we can also implement some rotation to the movement with a cross connect. So I'll go through each one of those individually. Key here is that top glute needs to be squeezed, and you need to be bringing that bottom leg up, almost trying to squeeze the bench. I'm gonna engage my oblique, pull with the adductor, and then in this instance, I'm gonna try and squeeze the bench between my feet. Straight line. Holding tight, glute is squeezed, hip in extension. I'm not leaning back, I'm not leaning forward, nice and stacked. Then we can go into some active flexion and extension. So starting at the bottom, coming up, drop the hip and come up, drop the hip and come up. And then finally, we can get into some active rotation. Key on this one is keeping that top glute squeezed because the tendency will be to shift your hips back. So we're gonna come up, arm overhead, cross connect, and come back. Cross connect. The beauty about all of these movements is they can be progressed and regressed as needed. They can also be implemented very light for mobility or actively to train the muscles around the joint in a more transferable fashion. One of the things that I see so often with core strength is they're either trained for really high reps or they're trained with really low load, very far away from failure. With all of these movements, you can load them and actually get a decent amount of stimulus and train them close to failure, where you would actually get the transferability to your big three lifts, to your athletic performance, which is ultimately what we want. The final core exercise we're gonna go through today is a single arm farmer carry. The reason I like this, it implements rotation because our pelvis is moving as we go through our gait cycle. It also includes single leg stance. As we carry that leg through in our step, we're on one leg stabilizing core with an opposite hand load. Phenomenally effective. And we can do these heavy for short durations, or we can do them very light for long durations. One of my favorite things to really improve core strength is picking up a 20-pound kettlebell, a 30-pound kettlebell, and going for a 20-minute walk, switching hands every minute. Nothing will light up your core more than a walk like that, and your hips will be fantastic because they're going through that natural lateral sway of your gait cycle. Key here is we're trying to keep our midline centered, allowing for a natural hip sway as we go through our gait cycle. You're not leaning to compensate, staying nice and tall, getting a dual purpose of training the grip when the kettlebell is low, or we can also bring that kettlebell up to a front rack position to get a bit of a different stimulus here. And then if you're feeling super froggy, bring it up into an overhead position and practice some anti-extension and shoulder mobility. So there you have it. Some of my favorite ways to train the core in a way to actually improve your hip mobility, as opposed to just training the abs in a crunch or in a side bend from more of the aesthetics. I have a great core, very well developed midsection, and it's also transferable to all of the other things that I do. If you want to get abs, you're gonna have to have low body fat percentage. But the more developed your abs are, the more hypertrophy those muscles are, the more they'll show through, and the more they'll actually transfer over to the movements that you're doing that actually matter. Hope that was valuable for you. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and I'll catch you on the next one.